Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tokyo. The local time now is 20 minutes to midnight, and the temperature is 12 degrees Celsius. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign is turned off.
Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers Podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Praxis. Praxis is one of our favorite companies and a company we are very excited to have as a sponsor for this show. We talk a lot on this show about how travel has affected us and the directions we want to go in life. It's helped us focus on what we care about, and it's helped us see the value of self-directed living. Praxis exists to bring that philosophy to professional development. It's about creating a career that's not only passable, that not only helps you meet your basic needs, but actually makes you come alive, that you enjoy. Praxis combines an intensive 3-month boot camp at the start where you learn professional skills, and then a 6-month paid apprenticeship at a dynamic growing startup. No matter if you're right out of high school, finishing a gap year during college, or taking a career break, Praxis might be right for you. Go to theworldwanderers.com/Praxis and you can find a sample from the very first module of the Praxis Bootcamp.
So it is just about 11:30 local time in Tokyo. We are still up in the air, but we can see the lights of Tokyo down below us. And it's been a really, really long travel day. Our day started at 5:15 this morning. When we woke up, left for the airport around 5:45, flew to Hong Kong where we had about 5.5 hours before our plane took off. 2 4-hour flights, one to Hong Kong and then from Hong Kong on to Tokyo. So we're really, really excited to hear the wheels coming out of the plane as we get ready to make our final descent into Tokyo.
Ohio, konnichiwa. Welcome to this episode of the World Wanderers Podcast, where we are talking about the island nation of Japan. We were really excited to go to Japan, as you heard in that first clip, and it was one of the places that was on our map, on our itinerary from the very start of our trip to Asia. When we left in October, we knew we were going to Japan in the spring, and so we were really excited that it was finally here and finally happening. The context of this trip is we had 2 friends from Atlanta who came to visit us in Canada in the summer of 2016, and we talked about meeting up somewhere in Asia and focused in on Japan. And we made this plan. We said, okay, in spring of 2017, we're hopefully going to meet up in Japan. And it finally all came together, so we booked our flights and had 3 weeks exploring Japan all lined up.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're going to focus primarily on our time in Tokyo, the 5 days that we spent at the beginning of our trip, and then there's 2 weeks in between that'll be in a second podcast episode with everywhere else that we went, and then the end of this episode focuses on the 3 days that we spent at the end of our time in Japan.
And so Tokyo is an incredible city. It's the biggest city in the world. It has almost as many people as the whole country of Canada does, packed into the metropolitan area. And I think it's really unlike any place we've ever been before.
Yeah, it's an incredible city.
So you have a ton of people, but it's not chaos. It's not like a lot of these cities in Southeast Asia where it's incredibly hard to go anywhere or do anything. Very orderly, very efficient. And a very enjoyable place to be, a lot more quiet and calm than you'd expect, a city of that size. But on the other hand, there's a lot of crazy, weird stuff going on that you expect to find out of Japan and can find in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think that Tokyo surprised me in a lot of ways because it's the biggest city in the world. The population is massive, yet it's so calm, it's so organized, it's so quiet, and I expected it to be very overwhelming, very noisy, kind of New York-esque, but Asian style. And it really wasn't like that at all. It had so many amazing things to offer, so many cool different neighborhoods, hundreds, thousands of amazing restaurants to try. It would take you forever to try them all. And it was just way better than I think I ever could have anticipated it to be.
Yeah, it's one of those places where there's so many different interesting neighborhoods to check out. It's like a gigantic proverbial onion. And you can only peel back layers slowly. And so in this episode, we will start to peel back a few of those layers as we go on with clips we took while we were there and mix it in with us jumping back in to narrate it.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor to use to describe Tokyo. And so we meet you on the streets of Tokyo just as we're about to start our very first walking tour of our trip. And that walking tour is with Context Tours. And so we'll see you on the streets of Tokyo.
So we have arrived in Tokyo.
Sure have.
Follow us from the crowd.
We are staying in the neighborhood of Asakusa, which is near to the Sky Tree.
Yeah, and so we had a long day of travel last night. We came from Kuala Lumpur, connected through Hong Kong, and only arrived in Tokyo around 12:30 at Haneda Airport. And by the time we got through immigration, got a bus ticket, and got on a bus. The train doesn't run at night. It's about 2:45 by the time we got to the apartment we're staying at here, and about 3 before we got to even started getting to bed. And we are up bright and early this morning to go on a walking tour.
Yeah, so we're headed on a walking tour in the Harajuku area of town, which happens to be on the opposite side of the city. So we've got about 45 minutes between walking and training. So Uber is really expensive here. Taxi is really expensive. We don't have a car, obviously. So train is going to be our friend while we're here in Japan.
And it is just the perfect, beautiful spring weather today. It's probably like 13 degrees Celsius. The sun's out. It's really nice and warm. And it should be fun to get on the train and see, since it's rush hour, what that's like. Don't really ease our way in. So where are we right now, Amanda?
Omotesanto Street.
Omotesanto.
Well, yeah, which is like apparently the quote-unquote Champs-Élysées of Tokyo. So there's a lot of really high-end stores. I see a Gucci. We walked by a Prada earlier, Louis Vuitton. I see a Hugo Boss up ahead, which is a little bit less luxury, but still pretty high-end. Yeah, really big sidewalks. Big kind of like 4-lane street with shrubbery in the middle. Lots of really cool buildings with amazing architecture on either side. Yeah, but super quiet for how busy it is with people and traffic and that sort of thing.
And we just concluded a walking tour that we went on. We were able to get connected with Context Tours and went on a walking tour this morning around the Harajuku area and then down to Omotesanto, and it really focused on a lot of the architecture, which is one of those things where I feel like it's easy to just like not pay attention to, but like once you start noticing, then you're like, oh, there's actually like interesting stuff going on with all these buildings that are around. Do you think that's a similar experience for you?
Yeah, so I found it really interesting that they were talking a lot about how to earthquake-proof the buildings in the city, just because there's quite a few earthquakes here. There's expected to be a pretty big one soon. It's just something that I don't naturally think of, having grown up in Alberta, which is pretty central.
So anyways, we had brilliant timing with the blooming of the cherry blossoms today. Like we said when we first checked in, is beautiful day, sunny, perfect temperature. There's a little light cool wind, and cherry blossoms are starting to pop out. So we're going to walk up back towards Harajuku, find somewhere to eat, and then go check out some of these cherry blossoms.
Cherry blossoms!
So we just finished walking up Harajuku Street. Harajuku is a popular area for young teenagers, especially teenage girls, I think, to go shop and get type 2 diabetes. There's just...
Maybe you want to specify about that.
There's just cotton candy, crepes, ice cream. Everyone's like standing around eating something sweet. And it's just packed. It's a mosh pit full of people. And as you walk up the street, you're kind of squeezing together with people, dodging people stopping to look at shops or places selling crepes. And then quite a few of the spots there are people in Japanese using these cone things to shout out the offers they've got. So the one guy had bags, another was for what looked like a bigger kind of accessory store, and there's two girls out front with these cones yelling about something in Japanese. And from Harajuku, you come out into quite a bit more peaceful area right near a large park and a very important shrine. And so we're going to walk over towards the park, check out that, and then perhaps the shrine as well. What are your overall first impressions of Japan, Amanda?
Yeah, I really like it so far. It's pleasantly clean and orderly, and despite being super busy, it's a pretty quiet, calm city, I guess. I kind of imagined feeling totally overwhelmed, and the subway is definitely busy, but it doesn't really feel overwhelming, which is really nice. Just so much to see and do. The city is just so massive, and I'm already thinking about how I feel like we don't have enough time here.
Yeah, so today we went from the area we're staying in, Asakusa. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. By the Skytree.
Which is kind of northeast, all the way down to Harajuku, which is deep southwest. So we haven't seen most of central Tokyo, and it's a very long distance, the entire length of one of the train lines. And those are the two areas we checked out today. Not too sure yet of our plans for tomorrow. Our two friends, Steve and Julia, who are staying with us here in Tokyo, arrived late this afternoon. So we're going to be hanging out with those guys and going to explore more of the city.
So one thing that has been a little bit challenging is being somewhere that uses a different alphabet than us. I feel like, we had our couple days in China and Myanmar, but other than that, it's been very much the same alphabet that we use. And the Japanese alphabet, I'm so far from being able to read or understand that there's been a couple things where I'm like, oh, what is this food? I'm not really sure because there's no English writing on it. Yeah,
so today at the grocery store when we were looking for some sushi, and because so many of the other Asian countries we've gone to, English has a heavier presence there. I think maybe because those countries are more connected to the Western economy and maybe less self-dependent like Japan is. But today you're at the grocery store and we're looking at this fish and we're like, I think this is tuna. It's got a tuna-like color to it.
We ate it. I think it's tuna, but I'm not 100%
sure. It's a cool experience though, and it's fun. And you noticed that today too, first day here, but there's just all these fun, interesting cultural experiences. We went to activate our JR rail passes, which are passes that give you unlimited trains for 7, 14, or 21 days. If you're coming to Japan, definitely look into it. But we were in the station and having a terrible time finding the information booth where we needed to go to activate them. And we asked an employee of Japan Rail, where the information desk was. He spoke English, and he's like, okay, come with me. And walks with us, and we think he's going to point us around the corner or something. But he literally walks with us for probably 5 minutes, all up, down, and around the station to take us exactly where we need to go.
Yeah, it was so kind.
And then a similar thing happened at a different store where we were looking for SIM cards. An employee took us down out of the building and over to another spot where we could get the SIM cards. And then just a funny example is being in Family Mart, which is kind of a 7-Eleven style convenience store. And everyone greets you as you walk in, and as you leave, people are saying thank you and nodding and bowing. kind of dipping their heads, not bowing, but yeah, it's very, very fun and just like interesting switch up of the culture. So that was a cool experience on day one.
Yeah, definitely. I would for sure agree with that.
And so we booked an Airbnb apartment here in Tokyo, kind of outside of the city center. So it's pretty affordable. And the way I think a lot of apartments work here is that there's one bed in here, and then what we're actually sleeping on is just mats on the floor.
Yeah,
so
it's
there's
kind of like futons is what they say, but it's like futons on.
What would you call this?
I think it's like a bamboo mat.
Like
they're very traditionally Japanese.
So the doors they have some of those like sliding light doors, and then there's similar sliding cupboards that slide so smoothly and perfectly, and then the bamboo mat on the floor, and then there's some cushions. And so this apartment has the availability to sleep a lot more people. So we've commandeered all the cushions and piled them all up, and it's kind of fun. It's almost like camping or something.
It's like glamping.
Yeah, sleeping over with all these cushions and pillows for everyone.
It's very cozy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And another funny thing from the grocery store today was just seeing some of the weird products they have here. So, for example, Asahi, which is a popular Japanese beer, you can go get just over 130 milliliter can, the baby can. Then there's like a 200 milliliter can, which is kind of like a stubby normal size, and then normal size, and then a big one. There's just all sorts of crazy sizes of products.
Yeah, you were pretty fascinated by that.
And something that's really fun being here in Japan is getting this kind of culture shock, which it's not a bad culture shock, but it's the very different and not so westernized in that, like when we were in Kuala Lumpur, for example, you go to the mall and everything's in English and there's all these chains of things. You are very much thrown into this different culture here.
Although, I mean, as you say that, we stopped at Starbucks for coffee and we stopped to use McDonald's Wi-Fi. I didn't buy anything, but stopped to use their Wi-Fi as we set up our SIM cards. So, I mean, there's still like some Western influence.
But that's not, that's a good point, but it's not exactly what I mean.
Yeah, no. I do hear what you're saying, but I just want to make it clear that, like, there are, Western fast food.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think what I actually meant was that there is, it's easier to, like, stay in your bubble a lot of places than I think it was before. So in Kuala Lumpur, for example, it didn't feel like we got out and, like, really we're in like Malaysian culture. Mm-hmm. We were focused on work, so we weren't really trying to do it. But I feel like we were just kind of stayed with our own culture. We met up with a friend from Kuala Lumpur who is, interested in the same things we are, and very much I feel like kind of a similar culture with a drastically different background. And then another friend who's from the States. But here in Japan, it feels like you can't stay in your own bubble. You've got to interact with Japanese culture.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so we are here in Tokyo for a few more days. We will do more check-ins and stuff like that.
So after a really busy day one in Tokyo, we had a little bit more of a low-key day two. We both had a little bit of work to do in the morning, and we kind of relaxed until the afternoon when we set out with our friends Steve and Julia, who were there in Tokyo with us, and we headed out to Shiba Park to check out some of the cherry blossoms. And our original plan was to go for sunset. Unfortunately, it was pretty cloudy, so there wasn't actually a sunset, but we were able to check out some really, really beautiful cherry blossoms. And after only 2 days in Tokyo, cherry blossoms easily skyrocketed to the top of my list for my new favorite tree. I'd never really seen...
What was on the list before?
I mean, like evergreens
Pine.
and aspens. And I don't know. I didn't really have like a favorite tree before. And,
It made you make a list. That's how excited you were.
Yeah, no, but seriously, I mean, you saw me. I was like a kid in a candy shop. I didn't grow up somewhere that has cherry blossoms. So for me, it was such a privilege to be able to see cherry blossoms in person. And they're so, 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 so beautiful. If you've never seen them before, find a place to spend spring and see the cherry blossoms. And I just felt really grateful as well that they're only out for a couple of days, and we happened to get to Tokyo right as they were fully in bloom, and it was just really beautiful to see. So
yeah, it made the city almost seem like a movie set. We got really lucky with the weather as well. So our first day there was beautiful blue sky, temperate, not too hot, not too cold. And then just everywhere you would go, there'd be these white or pink, depending on the trees, depending on how pink it is, beautiful blossoms everywhere. It was just amazing. It was kind of surreal almost how pretty it was.
yeah, for sure. I thought that we were going to have to go kind of hunting for cherry blossoms, but they're just everywhere. Of course, there's places that you can go where there's more of them than others, but you know, right on the street we were staying on in Asakusa, there is cherry blossom trees, and it was just amazing to be able to see them. So we spent as much time as we could in those first few days in Tokyo, searching out different parks and different cherry blossom spots. And yeah, so we went to Shibuya Park, saw some cherry blossoms, and then we went to a meetup in the evening, had some dinner, hung out with Steve and Julia, who we hadn't seen in at least 6 months, and kind of just had a chill rest of the night. So day 2 wasn't too adventurous. We just explored a new area, saw some cherry blossoms, and then we check in with you from the start of day 3. So we are currently standing on a corner in the Asakusa area of Japan, looking up at the Sky Tree, which is the tallest building in Tokyo. And it is day 3 for us in Tokyo, and we are currently setting out to explore a bit of the city with Becky, who was on the podcast a number of weeks ago. Are you feeling excited for today's explorations, Ren?
100%.
Yeah?
Full of excitement. And so today we are exploring some of downtown Tokyo, hopefully going to get a solid portion of sushi. How have you been enjoying Tokyo so far?
Yeah, so I've been pleasantly surprised with Tokyo. I mean, I thought that it would be like a cool city to explore. It's the biggest city in the world. It's very modern. I knew all of that going into it, but what I didn't expect is how orderly and quiet. I'm so surprised how quiet it is here. I mean, we're walking down the street. You can probably hear basically no background noise. That's essentially what Japan is like. I think we've heard one horn, maybe one emergency vehicle. It's so different from how I expected it to be in like the best of ways. So I have really enjoyed it so far. The weather is really nice. It's springtime. The flowers are coming out. It's pretty like moderate temperature. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, echoing all of the same points. It's been great weather. And yeah, I was probably expecting to be a bit more crowded and overwhelmed at times, but yeah, very pleasant.
Yeah, it's surprisingly uncrowded, I think. Which is, I don't know, I guess I saw a video of the Tokyo subway at rush hour, and it was pretty intense, and just imagining, you know, how many millions of people live in the city and thinking like, wow, there must be people everywhere constantly. But there's actually not. I mean, we're walking on a sidewalk that's fairly empty. We've been in busy areas, but even then, like, the train is very quiet. People seem to be very quiet on the streets. There's no music bumping from anywhere. It's just a very peaceful place to be, actually. So, yeah, I quite enjoy it. I'm excited to see a little bit more of the city today. And so we will check in a little bit later from a new location.
So we had really good intentions of checking in with you guys while we were out and about with Becky, and that just never really happened. We got caught up with exploring, and we had a super fun afternoon. I think it was one of our most fun afternoons that we had in Tokyo. We met her near the National Palace. She took us to see the cherry blossoms that are a little bit different than some of the ones that you imagine where they stand up straight. It's more of like the weeping willow type where they kind of go down the side of an embankment. And so we went to see them by a river. It was absolutely spectacular, packed with people. She took us to see Tokyo Station, which is super beautiful. And then she took us over to Akihabara, which is the anime section of the city. And that was quite a unique experience.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of those places that's more like stereotypical weird Japanese stuff. You walk down and the buildings are painted all sorts of weird colors. I think there's a gigantic yellow building that says Sega on it. There's big arcades everywhere, a lot of video game stores. And I feel like it was really suiting because something happened right at that moment when we walked up. But there are these Mario Kart tours of Tokyo you can do. So everyone hops into a go-kart, dresses up as a Mario Kart character, and then you rip around the streets of Tokyo on a go-kart.
It looks amazing.
It looks, hilarious. And so we walk into this area of town, and right then a pack of people dressed up as Mario Kart characters go ripping by on go-karts. So it was really, really fitting, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. And we had the opportunity to go to a maid cafe as well, which is kind of a unique experience to have in the Akihabara area of Tokyo. And Tokyo in general, I don't know if there's anywhere else in the world that you can go specifically
I'm
to
sure
this
they're
type of
catching
cafe.
on other places, but yeah, it's a Tokyo thing.
Yeah, so essentially it's quite young girls dressed as maids, and they kind of will call you prince or master or princess, and it's weird. It's weird to talk about. It's weird to say we went. There's nothing like fishy happening there, but there's just kind of this sort of weird overlay of what is happening there. They come over, they introduce you as they'll be your maid, and they're at your service, and they'll do anything for you, and you can ring a bell to get them, and they're dressed up like maids, and they're very, very young, attractive Japanese girls. What did you think of the maid cafe experience?
It was weird. Yeah, so like you were saying, it's this kind of strange Japanese thing that's happening. And the crowd that goes is like, there's a lot of tourists because they've heard about this weird thing that you can do in Japan. And that's like a definite segment of the Tokyo tourism market. But then there's also these like old Japanese dudes who are there like playing, that you can pay to like play board games with people. And that's where you like
not with people, with the maids.
Yeah, with them. And so they're in a section and you kind of see that and you're like, this is strange. Yeah, it's interesting. You go, you pay like, I think it was like $14 and we got a drink, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and so we got a great audio clip from our time at the Maid Cafe that you get the chance to hear now. So I think that gives a pretty accurate picture as to what we're talking about when we say we had this sort of strange experience in Japan. But if you're going to Tokyo, I would definitely recommend checking out Akihabara. If you want a very unique experience, go to a maid cafe. She drew a bunny rabbit on my matcha latte. So I don't know where else in the world you can get that, but it was pretty neat.
And so after Akihabara, we went to a place called Shimo Kitazawa, which is the neighborhood that Becky actually lives near, and it's kind of like her hood. I guess you could say.
You could say that.
And that was a really cool area as well. Tokyo, like we mentioned before, has all these interesting neighborhoods you can go to. And they're very small streets, kind of like a walking neighborhood where you wouldn't really want to try to drive. But just full of people, really lively at night, lots of restaurants, cafes, arcades, places to shop, and places to go drinking. There's a few of those really tiny bars. So if you've seen much about Tokyo, you might have heard about the tiny bars where it'll basically be a tiny little room with a bar and like 4 seats, and that will be the entire business. And we actually went for dinner at a place called Shibuya, which was a kind of a really cool, authentic Japanese restaurant in Shimo Kitazawa.
Yeah, it would have been very, very difficult to navigate had Becky not taken us and spoken some Japanese, because there was basically no English interaction. Unfortunately, she knew the menu, she ordered for us, and yeah, we enjoyed a really, really delicious traditional Japanese meal. And I felt like that was the first meal that we had where I was like, damn, this food is really good.
Yeah. We had grilled fish, sashimi, a big radish, a whole bunch of really good stuff. It was kind of the type of place where everyone just shares everything. And we had sake served in a bamboo tube with bamboo cups. So a really cool, authentic Japanese meal. And then afterwards, we went out and did another authentic Japanese thing. We went to an arcade.
Yeah, and so I'm not really much of an arcade goer, but I actually thought it was really fun. There's some great drumming games. You can do downhill skiing. There's basketball type games. There's ones where you can grab with the claw and try to win prizes.
Yeah, the claw is really popular there for some reason.
Yeah, I don't even know how people win with that. But then you can also go into these photo booths and you can take really silly photos where they make your eyes really big, kind of like Japanese anime characters. So of course we did that. We got some great photos from that and just had a really fun night where I just found myself, like, the longer we were there, the more and more days we spent, the more and more I was just falling in love with the culture, because it's just such an interesting, unique place to be.
Definitely.
And so we check in again with you at the start of day 4, which is our last day in Tokyo.
And we've been pretty tired since we got here. We showed up really late on our first day. We had a walking tour the next day. And we've just been really go, 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 which is not how we've been in the last couple months. If you've been following along, you would know we spent 2 months in Bali, where we had, very relaxing days, mostly spent at the co-working space or going to yoga. And so this morning we had a little bit of a sleep in. We had a little bit of a late start to the day, and after doing a bit of work and having some breakfast, we made our way down to Shibuya. So Shibuya is where the major crossing is that you've probably seen photos or videos of. There's, 6 to 8 intersections of just massive amounts of people. It was really cool to be there on a Saturday because I feel like it was busier than we've seen it any time this week, and we've been there a couple times. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. It's insanely busy, kind of like a concert. So the pedestrian lights go on, and it's one of those crossings where you can cross in all directions, and the sea of people merges and intersects and pops out on the other side. 40 seconds later, the crossing's clear and traffic kicks back in. And in the Shibuya area afterwards, we went to a place that Idosa Ness from the Mimic Method, who we have had on the podcast recently, he recommended to us these automated sushi places. So you probably know about the conveyor belt sushi, where you go into the restaurant and there's a conveyor belt spinning around and you can pick off your sushi from there. But this is kind of like the next evolution of that. So you go in, sit down, there's an iPad in front of you, you kind of go through the menu, and this is really nice as an English speaker because the iPad has images, and it also has easy translations, which you don't have if you're dealing with a server. So you pick out your foods, and then a few minutes later, this little track in front of you brings a plate right to where you're sitting, and then iPad gives you a notification, you pull the plate off, hit the thing. And we were at a place called Genki Sushi. Genki means energy and exuberance, I think. I'm not a Japanese expert. But it's like, I'm high energy. And so that place was really awesome because we just went to town on that sushi and
spent maybe $20?
Yeah, I think just under $20, and we had so much sushi. So that was a great meal, and then from there we walked up to the JR rail station. We're headed from Tokyo towards Mount Fuji, hopefully catching the end of the cherry blossoms up there. And that actually, the interaction buying train tickets actually went pretty smoothly, hey?
Yeah, overall I think it went pretty smoothly. You seem to have a knack for the Japanese language. I have no idea where that came from. Maybe you were Japanese in another life or something like that. You asked him, do you speak English? He said a little bit. A little bit turned out not to be very much at all. But we were able to manage it. He seemed to understand the basics of what we needed. And I feel like that's a good lesson for when you're traveling. If you're not learning a language where you're going, I think that, being patient and using really clear words and just trying things like Sunday, 12 o'clock, Mount Fuji.
If that's actually what you're trying to do.
Yeah, of course, if that's what you're trying to do. Probably don't use that if
McDonald's Sunday, Mount Fuji.
Yeah, I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, that use basic words in what you're asking. When you ask a big complicated sentence, I feel like it's a lot harder for people to understand what you're trying to say.
So after a train ticket, we went up from Shibuya. Shibuya is pretty close to the Hirajuku area, which we talked about earlier on this podcast. And we made a return trip to Yoyogi Park. Yoyogi Park is one of the more lively places to go to the cherry blossoms. And we went right at dusk, which was the end of a long day of picnicking and drinking for people. So really busy Saturday, so incredibly busy in there. But just so alive and starting to be a bit windy, and some of the blossoms are falling off, so they're kind of scattering through the air. Just incredibly picturesque. And we walked back from there to the train, took the train back to here. But overall, the feeling of just walking around Tokyo in the evening, especially that 4 to 6:30 p.m. in spring, where there's cherry blossoms everywhere, there's these, super picturesque restaurants and people out in the park. It's so perfect. It's almost like theme park-esque.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like not real in a lot of ways. And I think that's what the draw to cherry blossoms is, because they seem really unreal. They're so delicate. They're so beautiful. They're so picturesque. Like these white, fluffy, snow-like things on these really dark trees. Just so beautiful.
So, like we mentioned earlier, we were traveling to and in Japan with our friends Steve and Julia Patterson. And so what we wanted to do before we left Tokyo was sit down with them and chat with them a little bit about what they thought of Tokyo. So you've heard a lot about our impressions of Tokyo, but we also wanted to give their impressions since we were spending most of our time while in Japan with them.
So we've been in Tokyo for 4 days now. When you guys came in, what was in the first 12 to 18 hours taking the train from the airport, what was your first impression of Tokyo like?
I was impressed. I was expecting to be overwhelmed, and I was thinking the buildings were going to be too high to see the sun, and there was going to be too many people to walk on the sidewalk, but I actually thought it was fantastic. And even though there's a lot of people, it's kind of got a homey feel to it. So I was very pleased.
Yeah, it's surprisingly quiet because nobody is really loud here. So it's not like New York City. Even though there's more people than New York City, it's so much quieter, which is really nice. And I like that.
Yeah, I think that we felt the same way as well. And have you found anything other than it being quiet really surprising about the city?
Just how nice people are. I mean, for real, I was just telling, I think you guys heard this story earlier today, but I was wandering around a place and it was raining out, and I was sitting on a bench, and this nice older Japanese lady came by next to me on the bench, and she said something that I couldn't understand, And she like pointed to her umbrella and said something. I was like, sorry, I don't speak Japanese. And then she opened her umbrella and scooted next to me and like put her umbrella over me. And I kind of scooted next to her. And it was this, I assumed that was like what she was intending to do. It wasn't some miscommunication. It was really nice. And then she just got up and like left. So that's not something you would get in the States or anything. That's like way over the top nice.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Julia? Did any moments stick out to you?
I think the cherry blossoms are really beautiful, and I also love picking up the really interesting little things about countries. So we've been kind of writing them down as we go to each country we go to. And Japan, I think probably the weirdest one is that they hardly have any public trash cans, which I think is really interesting. And that nobody eats in public, or hardly anybody eats in public, which I thought was really interesting too. And they also have very good Pokemon here.
Yeah, so Julia's been playing Pokemon Go just today mostly since you got your data. I feel like that's like such a quintessential experience to have in Japan, like to play Pokemon Go in Japan.
Yeah, and I shouldn't say that I have experience playing Pokemon Go around the world, but just in my time here, I've probably caught more Pokemon than I would have in a whole like week somewhere else. So they definitely have a good selection.
There's solid Pokemon density.
Yeah.
Has anything changed about kind of what you thought about Tokyo maybe after the first day, now that it's like 3 days later? Any kind of first thoughts that changed over the couple days?
I got an impression while we were on the train coming in, before we had even walked anywhere in Tokyo, that it was going to be a really cool city. And I just felt, I don't know, the feng shui, whatever it was, felt good. And that's been like magnified tenfold. We've been here, I don't know, 4 days, and this is like already one of my favorite cities that we visited anywhere. So it exceeded my expectations in the how many days we've been here.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I think, I guess I thought of Tokyo maybe when we first got here as kind of like this monolith, but I really have enjoyed seeing the different little neighborhoods, and I really liked where we ate dinner last night. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, that you guys said that you actually ran into somebody, a friend of the person who was showing you around, on the elevator or escalator, which is really cool because I think of Tokyo as so big that you can't even run into anybody that you know. So
yeah, I was really surprised. This like guy goes up, just, "Hey, Becky." I was like, "How do you know this man in this random section of town?"
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, it's just a small expat world," which I mean makes sense. You kind of stand out like a sore thumb when you're
that's the
foreigner.
That's the thing, is like there's so many people, but we were down at Shibuya crossing today, and it's just like in this sea of people, you can just like so easily spot each other.
Yeah. What I thought was cool is because there's so many people, every little part we've been is just alive. Like I haven't been to a city, even big cities, where every little nook and cranny is filled with people doing things that are like living. It's really neat.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been the weirdest thing for you so far? Just experience or...
The kindness of strangers. Honestly, this is a weird answer, but I think it's weird how comfortable and like accepting everybody seems to be of foreigners. Like it seems... It's on the one hand, it seems like we're in a foreign country, yeah, but on the other hand, I feel totally comfortable and safe here, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's a cheap answer.
You guys missed the maid cafe, so I feel like that would have been the obvious answer.
I think it's interesting that, well, we've noticed a lot of people carrying their small dogs here. Instead of walking their dog, they're walking with their dog in their hands, which I think is really interesting.
That sparked one in my head.
Okay.
What I noticed is the advertisements are very fantasy oriented. Like on subway systems, it's half of them are like anime characters, and it's like all in the context of this like mythical fantasy thing, which is kind of weird. It's cool.
Yeah, I've actually read stuff about because all the kids grow up with these kind of like sexy anime girls, a lot of the men kind of it's like kind of fetishized and like somewhat like more sexually attractive to them than like real women.
Like comic book characters.
Although that's like some anecdote that I got like 3 years ago, so it's probably wrong.
Some people on the street about that one.
Yeah,
Oxford conversation.
let's just call that confirmed for now. So Japan is known for having some of the nicest, fastest trains in the world, bullet trains, but also just the transit network in general. And so that's definitely one of the to-dos while you're there. But for people coming from Southeast Asia, the price can be a bit of a shock. I think some of the trains were in the range of flights, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. So what we did, the reason why we don't know the exact prices is that we actually purchased the JR pass beforehand. And so if you're coming in as a tourist, any tourist can buy the JR rail pass. You actually can't buy it if you're local or if you're on a working visa. So it's just this opportunity to get a little bit of a quote unquote discount for trains if you're a tourist. But the one condition they have is that you have to purchase it before you enter Japan. So we paid for our rail pass while we were in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And then we just got to flash our pass to get onto the trains. So we never actually really knew how much the trains cost, but when you do some Googling about prices, they're upwards of $300 for these Shinkansen trains.
Yeah, and so our trip went from Tokyo to Mount Fuji to Kyoto to Osaka to Hiroshima and then back to Tokyo. And just from looking at how many trains we would be taking and the price of a JR Pass, we decided that JR Pass probably made more sense from price point and also would just make it a lot easier as we went, not having to think about how much each ticket cost along the way. If you're going, it's definitely worth doing a bit of background research and not just assuming that the JR Pass is right for you, but most people, you will find it cheaper, especially if you time your trip so that you spend your time maybe in Tokyo up front and then do about a week worth where you would take 3 trains and just buy a 1 week JR Pass. You can get 1 week, 14 days, or 21 days. So look into it. We'll have a blog post up on our site about the JR Pass, and you can find a lot of good information on there and other places about it.
Yeah, definitely. And so, like we kind of mentioned before, we took the Shinkansen, or the bullet train, which goes upwards of 300 kilometers an hour to Mount Fuji, and we are going to do everything else that we did in Japan in a separate podcast episode. So this one is primarily Tokyo. So after a couple days in Mount Fuji, a week in Kyoto, a couple days in Osaka, a couple days in Hiroshima, we made our way back to Tokyo, and we check in with you from the Omotesando area once again, where we decided to stay this time around, and you can hear just how quiet and awesome the streets are. So we are currently walking along Omotesando, which is a really popular street in downtown Tokyo, and it is jam-packed right now. It's Sunday, there are so many people here, and I just wanted to share with you how quiet it is, because there are literally thousands and thousands of people on the street right now, and there's basically no noise. So continue to listen. So we returned back to Tokyo after 2 weeks of exploring Japan, and we were feeling pretty exhausted because we haven't been doing that much go type travel on this trip in Asia, with maybe Myanmar being the exception. So we were super excited to get back to Tokyo and have a couple days just to hang out with some acquaintances, see Becky again, eat some good sushi, explore a couple of the neighborhoods and see a couple of the things we didn't get to see the first time around. And one of the things that was high on our list was going to the fish market, which is one of the top tourist attractions to see in Tokyo. And so that was pretty much top of our list for our time being back there.
Yeah, so really all that was left on our list were those things, and then really trying to focus in and eat some really good food before we left.
Yeah, so we check in with you once again from the fish market in Tokyo.
So we have returned back to Tokyo after a number of weeks of exploring Japan, and we have 2 full days left in the city. So today is our second last day, and we are off to one of the more popular tourist attractions, although an attraction that was never and is still not intended to be a tourist attraction. It's the fish market, maybe called Suzuki, but we'll have to look that up because I think I'm butchering that in Japanese. How are you feeling about going to the fish market this morning, Ryan?
I'm jazzed up.
What are you most excited for?
So just from reading about it, it sounds gigantic. I think there's like 40,000 people who work there. It's 2 acres large, just fish everywhere in restaurants and stuff. So I'm just kind of seeing that. Nothing specific. And then also eating. It's like 9:30. Haven't eaten any food yet. It's usually uncommon for me, but I'm still kind of hungry. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, eating some sushi for breakfast, which will be a first for me. And then, yeah, just seeing how the local people get the fish from the ocean to the restaurants that we normally eat at. And so something to note is that if you want to go do the tuna auction, it starts at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning. So obviously we're not doing that. You do have to line up well in advance, and the trains don't run past midnight. So people usually go midnight, wait a number of hours. They only let the first 80 people in. So just because we didn't really want to get up in the middle of the night, we opted not to do that. Apparently it's a really cool experience. We've just decided to go in the morning. We did aim to get up earlier than this, but we've just hit snooze a number of times. So we're going now. We'll update you on what this time is like to go. And yeah, we'll check in once we're there. So we have made it to the fish market, and we're currently in the outer market, which is a little bit bonkers. There's people everywhere. There's stalls selling all types of things. They've got mochi, they've got eel skewers, there's beef tongue, lots of fish, different products and that sort of thing. So far it's been really busy, but super cool to see. Everyone's just out buying, exploring, eating. We'll let you know what we find in a little bit. So there are a ton of different options for eating at the market, and we ended up choosing a restaurant where we were able to get some salmon and some tuna sashimi. We got rice bowls, some miso soup, some green tea. It's all pretty yummy. What would you say you would give your lunch experience out of 10?
7.
So not a perfect experience, but definitely good, and good for the price as well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, really solid. It was kind of one of those situations where there's like so many good restaurants around that you kind of want like a spectacular experience, but it was really good.
Yeah, and now we're heading to the actual fish market. So there's kind of the market with all the food and that sort of thing, and then there's also the fish market where the tuna auction would happen, where you can buy the fish early in the morning, or where the people who own restaurants would buy the fish. So we're heading over there to take a look, see what that's like, engage with the smell of seawater and sea animals and that sort of thing, and we'll let you know how that goes. So we have entered the fish market area, and as I'm sure you can hear, there's a lot of trucks and movement happening. There's a bunch of those machines that have like forklift things on them to carry around slats of, I guess, fish in this case. So it's a lot more industrial over here. There's not as many stores catered to tourists. And that's something that you can read about online, that you have to be pretty careful when you're walking through the fish market, because, you know, it's a market that's set up for other people, like for the industry and for the business owners to shop for their fish. So we're going to explore a little bit and hopefully be able to see some big tuna. So today is our last day in Tokyo, and actually our last day in Japan. So I'm feeling a little bit sad that our trip is coming to a close, but I think our bank accounts will be grateful for us to move onwards to somewhere where it's a little bit more affordable. And so far today, our day has been a little bit slow. We had to check out this morning, even though our flight isn't until 6 a.m. tomorrow. Something that's actually kind of frustrating about Tokyo is that the train doesn't run between midnight and 6 a.m. and both the airports are quite a distance out of the city. So we kind of looked at our options and realized that we either have to take the last train or one of the last trains to the airport tonight, or we had to pay for accommodation near the airport, and accommodation near the airport is very, very expensive. The cheapest we could find was, I think, like 150 Canadian dollars. And our flight leaves at 6 a.m., which means we have to check in at 4 a.m. We'd have to leave at 3:30 a.m. So it's kind of like, why pay that much money when we can't even have a full sleep anyways? So basically we opted to take the last train around midnight tonight, and then we'll find somewhere to sleep at the airport. And so sleeping at airports.net is a pretty popular website. Lots of people use it. Ryan and I are kind of both sleep snobs, I think you could say, so we don't commonly do things like that, but I found a couple different options for us once we get to the airport. But we're excited to have one last day of kind of exploring. We feel like we've done quite a bit of the stuff that we wanted to do in Tokyo, but one of the areas that we hadn't been to is Shinjuku. So we checked out of our place, we stored our luggage at Shibuya station, which is where we'll catch the train later tonight to get to Haneda Airport, and we've made our way over to Shinjuku. We had a really good meal, not Japanese food, craving some vegetables over here. And now we are making our way to a really good coffee shop where we're going to spend a couple of hours. How are you feeling about leaving Japan, Ryan?
I'm a bit torn. I'm kind of sad to be leaving, in one hand. But I'm also excited to go to Taiwan. Something that's been kind of bothering me here in Japan is just the allergies from cherry blossom, so you can probably hear I'm congested. And I'm hoping that Taiwan will be a little bit better for that, although it might be the same thing.
Yeah, I'm excited for a little bit warmer weather. I checked the weather in Taiwan. It's a little bit warmer there, probably about 10 degrees on average, so it's been a bit chilly here.
Yeah, but yeah, fantastic place. Really liked it. And yeah, one of the few places where I really felt sad to be moving on. Part of me feeling like, oh, not quite ready. Today, since we've checked out and we've got our bags, it's kind of like getting excited to, get our bags, get to the station, get to the airport and go. But yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, so we're going to check out a coffee shop here in Shinjuku, kind of see what Shinjuku has to offer. And then we're meeting up with Becky, who's been on the podcast one last time. She's going to take us for our last sushi meal in Japan. And we will check in with you a little bit later.
So we spent most of our last afternoon in Tokyo hanging out in Shinjuku, drinking good coffee, and just relaxing a little bit since we were pretty tired, as previously mentioned, before we met up with Becky for one last sushi dinner, and she took us to this really, really amazing Japanese restaurant. Once again, somewhere that we probably would have struggled a little bit without having her to speak a little bit of Japanese. So we had our one final delicious sushi meal before making our way on the last train to Haneda Airport. We arrived there. We found a bench essentially to sleep on for a couple of hours before catching our plane onwards to Taiwan. And so this is part one of a 2-part episode. So stay tuned for the next episode where we'll take you to Mount Fuji, Kyoto, Osaka, and Hiroshima. And if you're keen to see photos and other things from our trip to Japan, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at The World Wanderers Podcast. And as always, you can find the show notes at www.theworldwanderers.com. See you guys later.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.